For over half of this season, the Marlins were actually one of the best teams in the National League. Will they improve this offseason? Will they be forced to improve this offseason?
You are Locked On MLB Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are the number one, not the number 11, the number one sports podcasting network out there. And boy, oh boy, is that a fun thing to be a part of. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. On this crossover, please call me Sully. We're crossing over with the host of Locked On Marlins. Please introduce yourself to the fans.
Jeremiah Geiger, host of Locked On Marlins. Excited for this crossover, Sully. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, it really should be. By the way, follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, or whatever it's called these days, on Instagram. And I'm your pal Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. The best way to get a hold of us is right here on the YouTube page. And today's episode is brought to you by good friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. All right, we'll get to the trivial question a little bit later on today's show. We are going to be talking about the Marlins. We are going to be talking about the fact that they can improve. They may be forced to improve. Why I think that's good for baseball, and why I think forcing them to improve is showing why the possibility of a labor stoppage is so absurd. However, let's just talk. Jeremiah, we talked a little bit. You've been a guest a couple, and forgive me, there is stuff happening around the studio here, and there's nothing I can do about it. We talked a bit last year. You've been on the show a few times, and I think a lot of people woke up last year. It took a Yankee series to wake people up, but that bizarre 3-game sweep of the Yankees, including the surreal 13-12 game and polishing them off, there were a lot of people in New York land who were saying, like, I can't believe we got swept by the Marlins. And then a lot of people took a close look at them and said, actually, that's not as embarrassing as you think it is. After June 11th, only the Brewers and the Phillies had a better record than the Marlins in the National League. And that's half of June, all of July, all of August, all of September. That's more than half the season. They played like an elite ball club. Tell me your thoughts about the fact that they had a huge improvement last year and where you think that's going to lead them as we enter this 2026 season.
Yeah, it really comes down to the young core that they're establishing. Kyle Stowers was a revelation for this team. Played like an MVP all season up until he got injured, missed the last 40 games or so. You had Agustin Ramirez, who, although he struggled defensively, proved, hey, he's a really good hitter, real legit power. And then, of course, the pitching, Edward Cabrera, who's a subject of this offseason. A lot of speculation surrounding him. He pitched like an ace. You had guys contributing. This team bought in, and it ends up with this team winning 79 games, getting eliminated in the last week of the regular season.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an outside shot of the Marlins making the playoffs. That's what people don't remember. And now the key is, how are you going to build on that? Are you going to just sit back on your laurels and do nothing? Or are you going to improve the roster? Because if you do, this 2026 team, I think, should have expectations to make the playoffs.
Well, I mean, Stowers was a legit all-star.
Yeah.
Sometimes their teams have an all-star because the rules say everyone's got to have an all-star. Stowers was a legit all-star. Also, Agustin Ramirez, and this was because he had a wonderful series in that fateful sweep against the New York Yankees. You know, people criticize, and I'm quick to criticize when the Marlins trade away their stable veterans, but he was part of the haul for Jazz Chisholm Jr. And, you know, when they traded Jazz Chisholm in the middle of the 2024 season, you know, it was another example of them breaking up the team that made the playoffs in 2023. But they got something back from him. They got a major leaguer back from him. Now, he's probably not a full-time catcher, but if they find it, you know, because there are lots of people breaking in as a catcher and go, maybe not. I mean, lest we forget borderline Hall of Famer and blink and you'll miss a Marlin, Carlos Delgado came up as a catcher initially when he was with Toronto, and they said, "Yeah, no, this is not going to happen." Dale Murphy, the borderline Hall of Famer for the Braves, friend of the podcast, and I hope he gets in the Hall of Fame, came up as a catcher, and yikes! But if they find a place for Augustin Ramirez to hit, he's got pop. Jesus Sanchez had some, he had some big hits along the way. And it seemed like Otto Lopez, who didn't have a great year, but he always seemed to be in the middle of stuff whenever there were big rallies going on. This was a fun, exciting team for more than half the season. In fact, if they had a lousy August, but if they played 500 ball in August, they would have had a legit shot to have a winning season last year.
Yeah, no, it's true. The month of August is what kind of doomed this team. Beginning of September, and then they started heating up, and you look back on it as a Marlins fan and you say, oh man, I'd love to have a couple games back here or there, because just how close the playoff race really was. I mean,
right.
I think the Reds got in at 83 or 84 wins. It was something minuscule. And that's where I look at the expanded playoffs as a good thing for the majority of the small market teams.
Yeah. I mean, you take a look, I mean, the gift, I mean, I have so many friends who are Met fans, including my cousin David, who's one of the biggest Met fans on the planet. And he was the one smacking his own forehead saying, the Braves had a down year. The Giants had a down year. All these teams, the Cardinals had a down year, and they spent more. The Mets spent like, a drunken sailor, and they couldn't get past Cincinnati. Cincinnati finished, since both Cincinnati and the Mets finished 83 and 79. And of course, since he got in because they had the tiebreaker, the Marlins were only 4 games behind that.
Right.
I mean, 4 games. That's like one extra win a month. They're a playoff team.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost how you have to think about it, And would they have gotten far in the playoffs? You don't know. No one thought the Arizona Diamondbacks were going to do piddly-poo in 2023. No one thought Philadelphia was going to do squat in 2022, and both of them won the freaking pennant. So, you can, especially playing a wild card series where if you have decent pitching, you can, if you win the opener, you put the team on their heels. That's what happened a few years ago when the Mets and the Padres played, and the Mets were clearly a better team, but the Padres won that first game, put them on their heels. Next thing you know, they got punched in the mouth. So, yeah, the Marlins, people seem to forget that they made the playoffs in 2023. It's not like we're going back to old black and white footage. Not that there is any old black and white footage. This is a recent playoff team. And when we come back, I want to talk about the fact that they're a lot closer to being a legit playoff contender next year than you think. And also the powers that be outside of Miami could be forcing their hand to do the unthinkable, which is improve. All right, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, you want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets for a same-game parlay for a shot at bigger payout. It gets every game exciting, especially for those teams you don't care about. And when your team's making that late push, oh, sweet tomato, it's fun. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. It is fun times to be the official betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Really good time to be that. The Marlins are at the bottom of the payroll. They had a lower payroll than the West Sacramento A's, and they had the worst attendance of any team that played in a major league ballpark last year. You have to make that distinction because the Rays played in Steinbrenner Field and the A's played based for insane reasons play in West Sacramento. So a lot of things seem desperate there, but it's also they nearly had a winning season with a lower budget than I have here at the Locked On Podcast Network. You know, spending, you know, reaching mediocrity in the payroll could pick up those 4 extra wins. And if the Marlins have to improve going into, notice how I phrase that, if they have to improve, um, what do you think their top priority is to improve going into 2026?
Yeah, so the clear and obvious hole on this team is first base. It's the lineup. And it's not to say that this lineup I think is bad or atrocious heading into 2026, but there's needs. For the outfield, you're good. You're gonna have Jacob Marcy and Kyle Stowers in left and center. The son of Mr. Marlin, Jeff Conine, Griffin Conine, will be in right, presumably platooning with Heriberto Hernandez. These names not a lot of people know of, but look them up. Look at the numbers, because at the end of the day, Sully, numbers don't lie. That's one of the things I like about baseball a lot. First base, though, is a black hole. There's nothing there that would lead you to believe they have their answer for the everyday first base position in 26, which is why you want to spend in free agency or swing a trade. Could Yandy Diaz be available? I know he's owed $12 million this year. You trade for him, you take on that contract. That's adding to the payroll. It's not free agency, but you're still adding to the payroll. Then you have the rotation. And this is going to be interesting because I did an episode on this. Michael King.
Yes.
The Marlins are interested in Michael King, who a long time ago was a Marlins farmhand before he was shipped off to the New York Yankees, but he's developed into an ace. I don't think that's even a question at this point. If you sign him in free agency, what does that look like? Because you could suddenly make the case for the Marlins rotation if you add Michael King into the fold, being one of the best, not just in the NL East, but in the National League, as in baseball as a whole. So there's room to improve. The bullpen is another big one that they're going to be taking a look at.
You know, there's been lots of rumors about Sandy Alcantara being on the trade block. I think there's pros and cons of trading the one-time Cy Young Award winner. Obviously, he pitches a lot of innings. He didn't pitch well last year. He had a couple of really good games, but for the most part, when your ERA starts with a 5, he didn't have a pretty good year. There is the argument of trading him while the memory of him being a Cy Young Award winner is still fresh in people's minds, and thinking that, you know what, we could turn him around and maybe the Marlins could get a major league ready player back for him. There's a big argument against trading low. You're going to obviously trading low for him. I personally, if I'm trying to aim for contention in 2026, I personally would keep him, because he has the possibility. You're not going to get value for him, and if he's going to turn things around, you'd rather you turn it around on your dime. And you're not asking with that people like Cabrera, and if you bring in King, you're not asking him to be the ace. You're asking him to have a turnaround season and pitch like a solid 3 or 4. And all of a sudden, and if Yuri Perez, who sometimes last year looked pretty good, I mean, he didn't have a great all-around year, but if he comes around and pitches well, you could have said depth. Or maybe, just maybe, Alcantara could be one of those people who transfers to the bullpen. It could be one of those pitchers who, all right, his starting days are over, but he's a stud in the pen.
Well, with Sandy, see, he had an awful first half. I mean, his ERA in the first half was over 7 or 8. It was terrible. Then the All-Star break rolls around. He has a couple games right before the deadline. The trade deadline happens. There was nobody knew. So a bunch of speculation. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? And he stays. And he says, I love it in Miami. I'm happy to be here. Super happy they didn't trade him. And what do you know? The next half of the season, throughout the months of August and September, he looked like a Cy Young contender again. He was legitimately back to being Sandy Alcantara, which is important to mention, because now you have Sandy, who looks like Sandy. They'll never move him to the bullpen. He's a starter. Um,
I
you
just threw
you
that out there.
Yeah, I mean, so some people would say I've heard stuff about Edward Cabrera. I myself used to say at the beginning of the last season, Edward Cabrera was going to move to the pen, and then look
Right.
what happened.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing for me with Sandy and a trade is that the optics are so bad when it
Yeah.
comes to trading him. He's the only guaranteed contract on their roster, solely. The
Yeah.
only guy making over, I think, $3-4 million. Of course, you're going to have arbitration, but he's making 17 million, which is far and above the biggest contract. You trade him away and you trade away that money, you have to reinvest it. At some point, you have to start keeping these guys and keeping some contracts. And also, again, going back to what we were saying in the first segment, their window is now. So trading Sandy for prospects doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're trading him for, like I was saying earlier, a first baseman, somebody that can help the lineup.
Now let me just ask. First of all, former former Marlins All-Star Luis Ariz and former NL batting champion. Not that that has the same weight as he used to have. Is basically floating in the ether right now as a free agent from San Diego. I like Ariz better than some people do. I think there's value in having a guy getting a lot of hits. I know he doesn't get a lot of walks. I know that the sabermetrics crowd would rather he cut down his hits and raise his walk total. I think there's something to be said about contact, about someone who never strikes out and puts the ball in the play. I think we saw the advantage of that with the Toronto Blue Jays. He's obviously not going to give you much pop. He's obviously going to give you much power, but he's also not going to make many outs, which I think is a positive thing. And he played well in Miami. What do you think of it? Would they have a reunion? Because he's probably not coming back to San Diego. And they would not play him. The only position he would play would be first base at this point. I'm just throwing that out there because I don't think they're going to get into the Pete Alonso sweepstakes. But would they do a reunion with Ariz?
So it's funny because a couple weeks ago, I tweeted out, and I'm a Luis Ariz fan. I love the way he plays the game. I loved him with his time as a Marlin, but I don't think he's the answer. I think the lack of power is something that haunted Miami last season. It's haunted Miami for years, is they just don't have enough guys that can hit the ball over the fence consistently. And with first base, I want somebody that has some pop. Is really what it comes down to. And Arias is just a contact hitter. It's gotten worse every year since he left Miami. And I tweeted that out. I said, I'll always love Luis Arias, but he's not the answer at first base. And he responded to that tweet. He said, okay. And everybody was going in my mentions, all these Padres fans saying, we love you, Luis. Don't listen to this guy. And I'm like, hey, it's nothing personal. It's just business, right? But yeah, I would rather go after, I mean, my dream target right now that's currently on a roster is Yandy Diaz. Pete Alonso is way out of the Marlins price tag. I said that like as soon as the World Series ended, free agency started, I said, we're not getting Pete Alonso. I'm not even going to talk about it on the show. But yeah, somebody with power, I think, is imperative for the team.
All right. When we come back, we'll talk about why the countdown may be coming for Miami to improve and why I think that's good for baseball. The NFL season is back. Easy for you to say. And honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. You got the long lines, you got the login screens, you got the prices jumping up at checkout, and it's frustrating. And let me tell you something, that's why I use Gametime. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price, and plus, all the fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Let me tell you something. I use this app, the Gametime app. That's what we're talking about, to get my tickets for the NLCS. I saw Shohei Ohtani hit 3 home runs and pitch 6 shutout innings. and I got a great seat to do it. Thank you, Gametime, because they have the it's just they first of all, I could see the seat. They show you the seat. They show exactly here's where you are. But I got the seat using the zone deal. I know where I like to sit in the stadium. Don't tell me where to sit. I said, here's the zone. Well, give me the best deal. And you got great deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL team can have tickets for as low as $100. It's faster. It's cheaper. It's so less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. I use it for the NLCS. You can use it for the NFL and many other combinations that begin with N. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Term supply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime. When? Do it today. Hey, before we keep going here, by the way, thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen, or Locked On Marlins your first listen. We are part of the #1 sports podcasting network. That's Locked On. Let's do the trivia question, which I did the other day when we had Javi Reyes from Locked On Padres. What member of the original 19th, I phrase this very specifically, what member of the original 1969 Padres received points in that year's MVP vote? He was a member of the original 1969 Padres team, and he got points in the MVP vote. And GRT Hughes, who's a great everyday Sully, got it correct. It was Tony Gonzalez got votes, but because he spent most of the year with the Braves, who were a playoff team, he was traded. By the way, good call, GRT Hughes, for pointing out he was traded for Walter Riniak, who went on to be a coach. But he played for the original Padres and was traded midseason to the Braves and got some points in the MVP vote, probably mainly for his time with Atlanta. But yes, good job. That was a weird question, but there you go. Hey, last year the West Sacramento A's were facing grievances for their cheapness from the union, and they had to frantically spend money bringing in Luis Severino, extending Brent Rooker, bringing in a couple other Springs and a couple other players to show no, we're spending money. Well, the Marlins are facing similar potential grievances. The sort of, hey, you better spend money or you're going to lose some of your revenue sharing and all this other stuff. I think that could be this is very well timed for the Marlins if they have to start spending money when they are on the cusp of contention.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it perfectly better yourself. I mean, the correlation with the new CBA coming up, the grievances, you have the Marlins, who are kind of right there on the outside looking in, who never spend money. All of a sudden, Bruce Sherman says, well, maybe I'm going to have to spend money. And they're starting to be a little bit more vocal, not being too open. They keep the cards close to their chest.
Right.
But they're interested in Michael King here. You wouldn't have heard about that at the end of 2024 or 2023. And it coincides perfectly with the timing of this rebuild, because it all starts and ends with a young core. For me, the way to rebuild a team is not like our friends over in Anaheim, where you spend on every free agent you can lay eyes on and then not build a farm system. You have to do both. And when the time is right, it's the timing of spending in free agency. The Marlins have enough young talent in their farm system and on their roster right now where you supplement it with a couple nice contracts here and there, this team will compete. It just will. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just talent. And the Marlins are right there, but will they do it? I've been hurt so many times before, Sully. I got to see it to believe it.
I know, but sometimes this is putting a penalty on them to remove revenue sharing forced the A's of all teams to spend money.
True.
And they didn't have, and look at, and you saw they avoided 90 losses last year. If you improve this team by one win a month,
right?
This is a winning team and a contender. And if you say, instead of trading away Alcantara and he pitches the way he did the second half, and you bring in you said Yandy Diaz was on your wish list. Let's say you bring in Yandy Diaz, you bring in Michael King. So right now you would have King, you would have Cabrera, you would have Alcantara, you would have Jansen Junk, you'd have Yuri Perez in your starting rotation. That's a pretty good starting five. You put in a good solid power bat at first base, and you still have Xavier Edwards. You still have Stowers. You still have Augustine Ramirez. And maybe you bring in a Jonah Heim or someone like that to play catcher. So you move Augustine Ramirez out of the catching situation. And some of your other young catchers could be around a Heim, who is a veteran, World Series, been there, done that. So it takes a little bit of pressure off of them. All of a sudden, they're forced to do this because of the collective bargaining agreement. And the Marlins are forced to be a contender. I mean, this to me is the exact I guess the best way to put it, and you hope that Peter Bendix does a halfway decent job of spending the money, because you could spend money and not do well.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Mets. But this could be the exact I guess illustration of what I've been saying, of how absurd it is that we're facing a potential labor stoppage when the solution's right there, which is, hey, if you're contending, or if you're on the verge of contending, raise your payroll
Yeah.
to there. I'm not even asking the Marlins to spend like the Mets or Los Angeles. I'm asking them to spend like Arizona,
Right.
and
Just
only
basic money, guys.
yeah, and only in Major League Baseball. I said this when we did my Rangers episode the other day. Only in Major League Baseball is Dallas a small market. In any other concept, Dallas is gigantic. But no, suddenly we're tiny little Dallas. Only in Major League Baseball is Miami not a glamorous city for a sports team. Only in baseball, we're tiny Miami. Why would anyone, a city that with their population of a combination of people from Cuba and people from the Northeast, the two biggest demographics that love baseball in a glamorous city that stars would love to live in, glamorous Miami, and save some tax money. But we're tiny Miami. Why would we do that? Maybe show what happens if we spend a little money, all of a sudden the Marlins could be in the playoffs for the second time in 4 years, and heaven forbid keep it intact, especially if you're not sure what Philadelphia is going to take a step back. You don't know what condition Atlanta's in right now. Washington's in full rebuild, and the Mets are the Mets. I mean, this could be that perfect Rubik's Cube for the Marlins to potentially win the first division title in their team's history if they improve the correct way.
Yeah, you never know. That's what it comes down to. I think the Phillies are on the downturn just in terms of age. The Braves, who knows? Nationals, they're not going to be a problem. This is an opportunity where if you overachieve a little bit and you play above your level, maybe it would take at times. You ace free agency, maybe make a trade. This Marlins team could shock the world, because ultimately you never know. I've seen this happen the last few years. The Royals, no one expected the Royals to make the playoffs 2 years ago.
No.
They were a couple games from beating the Yankees, who were the AL champions.
Well, look, I brought Arizona a couple years ago, made it to the World Series.
And
just
people
2 years
forget,
ago.
Sully, they were the 6th seed. Miami was the 5th. So in the expanded playoff era, if you take that away, Arizona never makes the postseason in the last 150 years. So it's all about getting to the dance. And once you get to the dance, anything can happen.
Well, look, and I hope that this illustrates the absurdity of focusing on Los Angeles and the Mets. It's basically, I've said this before, this is not a players versus the owners situation. The players have already given up a bunch. They have the revenue share, they have the luxury tax and all that stuff that wasn't part of the collective bargaining agreement 10, 15 years ago. It's basically 28 teams versus the Dodgers and the Mets. There's 28 teams that are towing the line of, we don't want to go over the luxury tax, and the Mets and the Dodgers don't care. And so And for the Mets, how did that work out for you? This whole absurdity, that you can't contend. Of course you can. We've extended playoffs. If the Cubs and the Phillies and the Padres take a huge step back, the Marlins have an opening they can run through. And so the fact of the matter is, you have to set it up to incentivize teams to look at. I understand if you're in a massive rebuild, you're going to lower your payroll. I'm not stupid. I don't think the Rockies or the White Sox should have a massive payroll right now. They're rebuilding. But if you're on the cusp of contention, or if you're Cleveland and you should be a pennant contender and you're at the bottom 5 of the payroll, that's when you got to say, hey, why own a team if you're not going to spend when you're on the cusp of winning? I understand. As I said, if you're in a full rebuild, when you save the money, I understand that. I'm not stupid. I want to end that rumor right now. But when you're on the verge of contention and Major League Baseball and the Players Association are saying, you better start paying money, that could show the way out of this labor pain. Sign a CBA, tell the Mets and the Dodgers, or do it, ignore the Mets and the Dodgers and say, all right, they're going to do what they do, and let's do what we do, and we have a good shot of winning. This
I'm
is
right
my
there with you.
this I vow. All right. Well, hey, any parting thoughts?
Well, just couple more months till pitchers and catchers report. So we got a lot to look forward to. Winter meetings is going to be fun.
Yes.
Excited for that. I think once Thanksgiving rolls around, you start thinking about hot stove season pretty seriously and get the trade rumors and free agent rumors ramping up.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring in today's trivia question, which is, what pitcher was credited with the first postseason victory in Marlins history? Way back in 1997, who got credited with the first postseason victory in Marlins history? Don't you say a word, Jeremiah. All right. Jeremiah Geiger is the host of Locked On Marlins, and thanks so much for listening. My name is Paul Francis Sullivan. I am the host of Locked On MLB. Please, 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 I'm begging you to call me Sully. I did a different sign off. That was not the way I usually do it. Ah, well, I'm going to have to live with it.